welcome to the Festival of Storytellers.
I can't tell you how excited I am to be on right now. It's been a couple of weeks of excitement, getting prepared, and I've done a lot of things in my life, but this has got to be close to the top.
Thank you, and Reader's Magnet, and thank you, John, for putting this forth and taking the chance on us authors in presenting this out to the world.
I've enjoyed this immensely, Joanne.
Ellie, so have I. Thank you for who you are, and thank you, Reader's Magnet. You all are beautiful, and you've worked so very hard, and we are blessed.
We are.
I thank everybody that's involved with this process, because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers. We thank Reader's Magnet and everybody that's involved. I love Reader's Magnet. They say, we share your stories with the world.
Hello, and welcome to the Festival of Storytellers, Author of the Hour edition. My name is David Vancelette, and I am the moderator for this session, and the author is Carol Wagstaff. It's a pleasure to have her. We want to thank, there's Carol, hello.
Hi.
And you can hear her, great.
I can hear you, and I'm excited about it.
I bet you are. Well, we want to thank Reader's Magnet for the wonderful work they do. I was just on the phone, or just on the line, I guess, speaking with the guy who's working from Sweden. He's in Sweden. It's almost, it'll be 2 o'clock in the morning there soon, I guess he said. I think they said they get 4 or 5 hours of light at this time of the year. So,
wow.
Wonderful guy, and technical, and knows how all these things work. And it's just nice that Magnet has pulled this together.
It really is, because I am not techie at all, obviously.
Yeah, they're doing things that I certainly couldn't do.
Yes, that's for sure.
So Carol is the author. Do you have your book handy?
I do.
Copy?
I actually, if you look at on the wall, you can see the.
Yes, we can see half of it. Yep.
Yeah, let's see if I can turn this just a little bit. But I also.
There it is. There it is. restore and rebuild.
Yes.
Hope
And
for families impacted by sexual brokenness.
yes.
Topic.
Yes, it is.
And,
And it's an unusual topic. I think you don't see a lot of books on this, at least these days. So, yeah, I'm glad to. Let's see. There we go. So I'm delighted to be able to talk about it, and with you, especially David, knowing that you are also a Christian author,
yes,
and it's going to be
yes,
fun to be able to talk to you about it. So,
yes. And I also occasionally have the chance to minister to people stuck in sexual brokenness.
yes.
You know, it's the pain is real. That's all I can say.
It really, really is. And I think it's easy to kind of not understand that and try to tell people they shouldn't feel that way. And that's not something you can do because it
No.
is very, very real. So,
Yeah. Let me
yeah.
just go over a little bit of who you are. You
Okay.
have a bachelor's in English, English speech and education from Olivet Nazarene University.
Yes.
Have a master's degree in faith and culture from Trinity University Law and Graduate School.
Yes. Yes.
And you've spent some time working as an assistant pastor, I believe, if I get that right,
Yes. Uh-huh.
in a South California church for 10 years.
Yes.
Started a ministry to families impacted by sexual brokenness.
Yes.
25 years you've spoken in schools, organizations, churches. You've led support groups, spent thousands of hours ministering on the phone or in person to family members,
Mm-hmm.
newsletters, articles, and letters, and now this book. So
Yeah.
you've certainly put yourself out there and helped many, many people. And
I pray so, David. I know that it's such a touchy issue.
it
And
is.
so many people, it's so tough on the people that struggle with it, number one, but the parents also have a very difficult time with trying to knowing how to deal with it and knowing what to do. And when I started this, there was nothing really out there for families in particular. There are a lot of ministries that work with those that struggle, and there's still quite a few good ones out there. But when I started, there was very little for families and how to respond as families.
Mhm.
And I still see that it's a very, very difficult issue. And just this week, when we had these times to hear from people who were listening to us, I had some people ask, what do you do when you just can't accept this in our home? And it's just so real. And it just takes so much time to
Yeah.
really work through this. And so I really believe that my book is very valuable to families that really will take the time to try to work through it with their kids. And it's a
Yeah.
very good issue. Yeah. I
I've
remember
looked
that.
at your book. I've looked at it, and I agree. The way you have set this up in an actual interactive book.
Yeah.
It's the first time I've seen anything like this, and I think it's tremendously useful the way you've set it up. Can you tell us a little bit about what drove you to write this book in the first place? Get
Uh,
involved in this area of ministry.
yes. You know what? I had a personal issue. I'm married young, right out of college, and did not know that the man that I married was struggling with homosexuality.
Mm.
And I continued in the relationship. We went for counseling for like 3 years. And then beyond that, went to a pastor that was also a doctor. And he worked very well for us. But during that whole time, my husband didn't tell me what was really going on. So until he was ready to talk about it, then it really was hopeless to do anything about it. So he really left the relationship. We were divorced, and he went on to live the lifestyle and eventually died of AIDS. And he was a brilliant guy, really brilliant, as they often are. And
Mhm.
so it just broke my heart that someone so gifted and that shouldn't happen that way. There's just too much that they offer. I had thought, and we both had wanted to be missionaries, or he wanted to be in ministry, and I was the one that wanted to be a missionary. And we just thought that this was perfect for us, but he never really said what it was. And so when he got out from our relationship, he got involved in the homosexual world. And it took about 4 or 5 years, and he died of AIDS. And at that time, there was not enough medical stuff that was really good for people at that time. So I was a typical spouse. I don't know how close you are to this kind of issue, but I was a typical wife. I was angry. Here I am, all my life I'd been a Christian, and I wanted to be a missionary. I wanted to do all the things that were right. And he just left me, and went on to live the gay lifestyle. And I really was angry, I'll be honest, with God and with the way that I was left. So, but what's so wonderful, David, is that God does work in our lives.
Oh,
That
absolutely.
it's so powerful. And I am so glad now that God began to really take all that anger out of my life and really put a love for people that struggle with this. And it just gets stronger. I've never been able to get rid of it. And God's done such a work in my own life, so that I have both passion for the families, but I also have passion for the people that don't know what to do with this. They don't understand themselves, and how difficult it is for them. So
In one
part
of
of this,
my in
go
one of
ahead.
my online sessions, I had a question asked of me: Can God forgive homosexuality?
Mm,
I said, "Of course He can. He
yes,
loves you tremendously and
yes,
wants you to break free. This is a spiritual battle between God and Satan, isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
And
I would
men
say
and
that
women they're caught up in the middle, and
they really are, and it's very, very difficult. Well, if you can even think it as a heterosexual man. I know so many men that their wives pass away and they get married right away. There's just such a need for that, and
yeah,
it's such a very, very difficult thing.
yeah.
And I do know God has saved some incredible people and taken them out of that. So I know that's capable. God's capable of doing that. But it is just a very, very hard thing to work through.
Why do you think it is that some can come out of it apparently successfully? Not that they don't struggle,
Hmm.
ongoing fashion, but some just fight against it and maybe even try it and say, no, I can't do it. I can't break out of it. Why do you think it's so strong with some?
I wish I knew for sure. My thought is that sometimes the wound is so deep. Um, it seems to me, from my experience, there are just an awful lot of men and women who have either been abused or molested. Or I just have a friend who just published a book that he has written himself, and his story starts when he was 5 years old, and there were a
My
group of teenagers that all raped him, and he was afraid to tell his parents about it. So he bore that burden and actually became involved in that world himself. So it's just such a difficult thing. I wish I could say that it was easy, but I'm so grateful that God is just incredible in what he can do if we are willing, and to deal with it. There's a lot of people that carry a lot of shame because they don't want to talk about it. It's so very painful. So it is something that is very, very difficult. And I think the hard part is that very often the parents don't really understand. I did this. I've been doing this, David, for 25 years. And I have had so many stories of people and what's gone on in their lives. And, you can find that there's problems within the family. I know one brother was raping his other brother, and the parents never knew that.
Oh,
And
wow.
it just it's crazy how very difficult it is.
Wow.
And the family then carries the shame, and they don't want anybody to know about it. And so it just gets it just gets very, very difficult. So,
I can't help but feel that the pain that parents go through
mm-hmm.
have this, and they discover this in one or more of their children. That the same pain that God feels.
Yeah,
Sure, God. I mean,
that's right. I
of
think,
course, God.
go ahead.
I was going to say that God, when He created Eve, He took some, from Adam's rib and created created Eve from that. And I think part of what He pulled out of the man was maybe a little bit more emotion.
Mm,
It seems that women are a little more emotional than men. I think
yeah,
that's borne out in the science that they've done today. But I think
yeah,
when you put a man and a woman together, I think that's a better picture of God as a whole, what He's like. So I would say that, given the emotions of a woman,
mm-hmm.
say that God is equally, probably much more deeper emotion than even a female would be.
Yeah,
So He
yeah,
must feel the pain that parents feel times
yes.
times 100 or a million, who knows how much. But I know it must really pain Him to see the pain that the parents go through.
Absolutely. And I think that sometimes we forget how much God loves us. God loved us when we were sinners, when we were doing all the kinds of things that we just shouldn't have been doing. And yet God's love is so full and He loves so deeply. It
Yeah,
makes me cry almost when I talk about it because it
I
is
know.
such a
It,
difficult thing.
it
So
is touching.
yeah, but I do know I have some friends who were in the lifestyle for a long time, and they have been able to walk through with the Lord and stay faithful to Him, and so it is possible. I see it possible. But there's also there has to be a time where you let go, and that's very hard.
Hmm.
It's something I saw with my husband. The longer that he lived in that life, the more difficult it was for him. And when he passed away, he was living a very terrible life in terms of losing his faith. He lost his faith. He kept, having all kinds of relationships with all kinds of guys and all kinds of situations. And I especially feel badly because he was so talented. He was incredible, incredibly talented. And I think, to me, it just seems like Satan just tries so hard to destroy people.
Yeah, there it
It's,
is. There it is, right there.
it really,
Whatever He
really,
can do.
yep, that's right. So I'm thinking of these parents that don't understand it. They don't like it, and they don't understand it. But they've got to know that God's love is greater than anything that's going on in their lives at this point, and that
Yeah.
He wants to bring healing to them because He has something very special. I think about this friend of mine who now preaches online to people around the world, and
Oh,
he was
wow.
in the lifestyle, and now he's been out of the lifestyle more, and he's just very powerful because of
That's
his
wonderful. That's
relationship
wonderful.
with God. Yeah, and it is possible. So that's the wonderful thing about it.
Did
Yeah.
you actually help him yourself, or was he helped by?
No, he actually, when I decided finally, I my husband passed away, and I went through this period of time where I was really angry, and I felt like God was calling me to something in
Hmm.
this area. And so I left the church where I was serving, and I just said, I know God's calling me to this. I don't know what it's going to be like. But I began to work with families. I began to see what was really happening behind the doors of the homes and what had happened. There's so much sexual abuse.
Hmm.
It's just unbelievably high in this area, both for men and women. And for women, often, and I think of the girls that I dealt with, there were issues, some of the most heartbreaking. And I tell this story because it's heartbreaking. But a girl that I knew, she was the only girl in her family. She had a good family, as much as I could tell, and yet she was raped in a park by a man she never knew.
Hmm.
And her after that experience, you can imagine how horrible that would be, and that she didn't want to have anything to do with men. Well, I think I could be like that too. I
Yeah.
had another woman who also she lived in New York, and she got off of the bus, and a man raped her there, just right. It was in the evening, early evening, and raped her. And I just think, how do we hold those people accountable? It's so tough. It's so very tough. So you have all these stories. I could tell you story after story. There's so much. So we have to
So,
be
it, so if someone blames God,
Mm-hmm.
as you know, whenever someone's involved in some kind of tragedy, it's typical. I mean, if a young girl is, stolen and killed, raped and killed,
Yeah.
and the parents blame God for that, for allowing that to happen. They would,
Mm-hmm.
if God is so powerful, why did He allow that to happen?
Wow.
Just say to a group of parents, two parents who said that, made that kind of argument.
You know,
Is there anything you could say to them?
it's really, really tough. It really is. And I don't know that I have a good answer,
Mm-hmm.
except, I'll tell you this, and I'm not sure I would say this to anyone, but I know that the older I have become, that the Lord has allowed things to happen to me because there were things that maybe He needed to do to change me. Like, for example, I was angry at my husband. But after God began to show me the people that were involved in this and all the families that were hurting and so on like that, my whole attitude changed. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought God sometimes allows us because He needs us to reach out into a world that we don't want to reach into.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I have found God to be just so good through us in all of those situations. And I'm so glad God took me through what I went through
Mm-hmm.
because I'm a different person. And
Yeah.
I would never have been able to reach out like this. This book took me 7 years to write. And I did it. I had this ministry going in Southern California, and I was so caught up in that and talking and speaking and so on like that. And finally I finished it. But I'm glad that I waited because I learned so much in the process.
Yeah, I
And
bet.
so it's just been a real blessing to have this help people. There's one little lady, I wish I remembered her name, but she's the one that got me to write this and finish it. And
No kidding.
she was a farmer's wife out uh, in the middle of Iowa, I think, or something. And she cried on my shoulder for quite a long time. She had a son that was seemingly gay, and it's not very common for young men who are born on a farm to have this issue. That's pretty unusual. It's more the large city that this kind of thing happens. And she had no one near her, no counselors, no anything, no ministries that dealt with this. And when I got off the phone with her, okay, this is for her. I'm going to finish this because I want her to have something. So that's my prayer for people, even as we go through this today, that
Mm-hmm.
there'll be someone who said, "Oh, I've wanted so much." And you know what's really hard now, David, is the counselors. They're giving them so much flack, and there so many of the states now are not willing to let them even help people that need
Yes,
this.
I
And
know.
it just
It's
breaks my
terrible.
heart. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I look at this, my book may not be perfect, but at least it gives people a chance to process what they're going through and
Yeah,
how
sure.
they need that help. So yeah.
And it's all, when the part of the book that I was able to look over, it's almost like you are the counselor right there with them. Ask
Mhm.
questions and you give space for them to write out the answers. You draw them out with
Yes.
probing questions.
Yeah.
And in writing it out, they get to clarify their own feelings
Mm-hmm.
on
Mm-hmm.
paper. Whenever you put anything on paper, you put it out, you have to clarify it in your own mind first.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I thought when I first read it, I thought, what Carol's doing here is she's helping them process the feelings and categorize the feelings and make them uh, understandable and in a sense make them finite because they're
Yes.
infinite. But when you put them down on paper, they don't look so bad. And it's something you can say, I need to work on this.
Yes.
I just think your format is wonderful. I really do.
Well, thank you.
Apparently, a lot of other people do too, because on the back of your book, you have a list about, this long of people who are telling you that this is a wonderful book. Joe Dallas, for example,
Yes.
a quote from him
Yes.
I wanted to share a little bit of. It says, when Christian families hear the announcement, I'm gay, from a loved one, They need immediate direction, reassurance, comfort, and godly wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
More qualified to
Yes.
provide all four than Carol Wagstaff, who's been serving such families for decades now.
Mm-hmm.
Dallas, a very well-known national speaker and author, and there were
Yeah.
several others who wrote
Yes.
the back of your book as well.
Yes.
So it's a wonderfully put together book.
Well, thank you. One of the gentlemen that made a comment there is a psychologist himself, and he works with young men. In fact, he has some workbooks, and they're not like mine, but he uses these workbooks in helping young men who struggle with this.
Yeah.
And he wrote on mine that this was a great way to cure the pain and so on. And so I felt very honored that he would do that. But for people who are counselors, it's a wonderful thing to work with people, even as with the book itself. So it's been a wonderful opportunity. So,
Yeah.
And
To work with them to help show them that it really isn't God's fault that he does these things. I was thinking earlier of the book called The Shack.
Yes.
He was just going through so much grief because his daughter was stolen away from the campsite and taken and raped and killed.
Yes.
God came down in the three persons of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit and walked him through. He brought him to the point where he could deal with that.
Yes.
And not blame God for it. I think a lot of parents would, understandably so, would say, "Where was God, and how come He couldn't help?"
Yes.
It's just because God is involved in this spiritual battle with Satan, and Satan is the one doing this, not God.
That's really true. And it's been really interesting. A friend of mine wrote a book about cancer and how God, while we're the person maybe that has the cancer, God's allowing that for a certain reason. So I'm just thinking, wow, God, you have given us an incredible thing to bear, and yet there's something behind it. So I think about the wonderful people. We just had a 25-year anniversary for the ministry. And I was able to go back to California and see all these people that I had seen when they first came to me, and they're now carrying the ministry. They're leading groups and I just, wow, it's just a blessing. It was really, really great. So I feel very honored to have had that opportunity.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I've read recently that when Jesus came, he saw things like cancer or illness or something else, this or that, issues of blood, and he was grieved in his heart for these people because this isn't how God made the world.
Yes.
Tension for people to suffer like this.
That's right. That's right.
It brings in the suffering.
Uh-huh.
He went around healing everybody that he could. Because he couldn't heal somebody.
Yeah.
Someone who was in need, he healed them.
Yes.
That's how his heart was. He was compassionate and wanted to see people whole. Ministry has been about too, is making people whole again who have been suffering from this.
Yes. And I think that's what's hard for me right now. People have asked me this week, what is my dream? And my dream is to help people understand that God loves us so much. This is not his will to move into homosexuality or to live that way, or even now we're seeing such young people go into transgender stories. I will never forget about a young man, and he was probably, I would guess, about 17, 18, and he came to see me with his doctor and pastor, and he had been abused since the time. I think he had been abused about eight years from his grandfather, who was not his real grandfather, and he had been living with them. The boy had been living with his grandmother because his mother was in jail. You see already what's happening there.
Wow.
And this grandfather was taking advantage of him for a long time. And when I had a chance to talk to them with a pastor, he was playing both roles. He was playing a transgender role, but he was also doing homosexuality on the side. And it's just this poor young man. I ache for him,
Yeah.
to know
Yeah.
what still happens in his life and trying to deal with that. And you see so many issues like this. And the church really doesn't understand how to work with it either. So I would even say this, David, that a pastor who wants to have have groups in the church or know how to help a family, I really believe that my book could be helpful to him, even
No
in
question.
yeah.
No question about it.
So
As a matter of fact, my wife is starting to, she wants to meet with a few local pastors of churches we've visited recently.
uh-huh.
Something started.
Wow.
Group of Christians, and I think it has to do with the American Bible Society or something. They have a program started.
Wow.
Involved with that, and she wants to get groups started, small groups, and your book would be ideal for that.
Wow. Well, I thank you. I think there are ways to lead it. There's actually a reader's guide that came with it on the inside of it, which is there too, that can be used if they're a group or whatever, which really
With
helps.
your book.
Yes, uh-huh.
Oh,
It's in
great.
the back, so that might be something that she could get as well.
Sure.
Hateful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I was thinking we were going to talk a little bit about the title of the book and wondered how you felt about that as a title. I think the question comes to me that way too, but how did that ring with
I just read through it and it seems perfectly fitting, but to focus on it now,
you?
it's even more interesting now that you've mentioned to it, because first of all, reclaim means you've lost something.
Yes.
And lost something that belonged to you, and it's time to get it back again.
Mm-hmm.
To get it back is to go through a restoration process.
Yes.
Once restored, then I think you've got the order right. I think it's interesting the way you lead people through that title.
Yes. Well, I think what happens with the culture like it is, it's left to feel that it's something you can't change, that's something you're born that way. And I've been in this long enough to know that there's nothing that says that it's something you're born with.
Well, that's an interesting question. If I can just stop you for a second.
Yeah.
I know back when I was looking into this, in fact, I went to a seminar led by Joe Dallas, and I think I told you with Joseph, what's Joseph's last name? I forgot his name. Nope, can't think of it. But he was a psychologist out in California.
Yes, he's since passed away.
Joseph Nicolosi.
Nicolosi.
Remember that name? Nicolosi?
Yeah. I knew Joseph real well.
So what they said, now I lost my train of thought. Oh, I hate these senior moments.
About whether they were born gay or not.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Yes. At the time, they were saying that the hypothalamus was, I think, smaller or larger, and that was a tiny, bean-sized organ in the brain.
Yeah.
They found that was the cause. Well, they don't know it's the cause, right? They don't know if it's the cause or the effect.
Yeah.
What is the state of science? Have you followed the state of science with that kind of?
Everything I've seen, there's one particular author who has written an awful lot and done a lot of study on it. My brain is not as fresh as I'd like it to be, but he's written an awful lot and he's done a lot of studies, and I followed him still, and he's still on the same track where he does identical twins and compare them.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't make sense, because even with the twins that are identical, one can be gay and one is regular. So I don't think that there's anything that proves it anyway. But I do think, now that I've been in it long enough, and I'm not a doctor, so I want to be real careful what I say here. But what I have seen, when you see the context of the whole family, there's a lot of stuff that can impact it. And some of the reading I have done, that it starts even as a child is between 2 and 3 years old, or up to 5 years old.
But these are behavioral things, not
behavioral things,
physical things. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I tend to go that way, that there's a lot of stuff that impacts the child. And some of it, like, for example, the molestation and the issues, sexual issues, can be very, very compelling. There's just an awful lot there. But usually, when the child isn't able to unload that, or the parents are afraid to talk about it, or they're afraid to really acknowledge that there's something going on there. And we're all very sensitive about our lives, our families, all those kinds of things that have impact on it. But I
Well,
think
there's
it's
shame, right? There's shame involved.
absolutely, and there's one whole chapter on shame in this book, and I really feel I didn't realize this at first, that people that struggled with homosexuality or transgender carry a lot of shame around in them. And it's so particularly hard as us as Christians, because I remember a long, long time ago, I was very, stubborn in what I believed and what I thought was wrong. And I had no idea the suffering that went on with those people. And I have seen people that are transgender, homosexuality, and there's so much shame in their lives. And for us, those of us that are Christians, we make it worse for them when we don't listen to them and love them, and the issues that they're dealing with. So I think there's just a lot of stuff in our lives that we deal. And in some of what I talk about in here are there are issues that happen in the family, that go down generationally, and there's just a lot of stuff. So I'm really, I think the thing that's most important for us is to see who God is first, and acknowledge the love that He has for the deepest sinner out there that we could even go
I
to.
think there's some pressure involved from two different directions that
Mhm.
all make taking a stance difficult, if not impossible, for a pastor. And one
Mhm.
of it would be, this is a sinner who needs a hospital, a spiritual hospital, which is what
Right.
it should be, and
Hmm.
for them. But on the other hand, the pastor has pressure from society that is
Yes.
allowing, not, did I say allowing? How about pushing? A government that's pushing this.
Hmm. And I think, David, that's the part that upsets me so much. There's so much coming around culturally,
Mm-hmm.
that's happening to us, and parents are they don't know what to do, because they know, particularly if they've born and raised in a church, what the scripture says and so on. But they hear all this stuff, "Oh, this is the way that you're born," or "this is the way you need to do this because whatever." And I think we need something. In fact, sometimes when I talk about this, I don't know if you notice that Nehemiah is the key character in
I
this.
wanted to ask you about that. I'm glad
Yeah,
you brought that up.
yeah.
What is the similarity between Nehemiah?
Well, I love the story of Nehemiah because Nehemiah was one of the children that was taken out from the Israelis out to, and I can't think of the name of where
Probably
it was.
Babylon, I guess, right?
Yeah, Babylon.
Yeah.
And so when he was taken up there, he became, and in fact, I actually have this story in the book, so I really love the story, where he becomes what it is. He
A eunuch.
becomes, a eunuch. So he never knew his parents that we know of. He became a eunuch. And the reason he became a eunuch at that period of time is that he was with the queen. And so what they would do is they would force the men who were with her to help her all the time to become eunuchs so that she would not be sexually hurt by them. So here was a man that lost his family. He lived among the place where it was not a good place for him to be. He had every reason to be angry at God for not having his family or not doing whatever. And I think about that with respect to myself, maybe because how angry I was to start with. And yet he was so devoted to God. Somebody in his family really brought him up well. And he just followed the will of God. And what I like is that when he knew what he was supposed to do, and he followed God in that. And he didn't let the people around him, who were the people there that did not want the city to be built or the walls to be built. So they
Right.
made fun of him all the time. And I see that a lot in this issue. I go to an airplane or I go talk to somebody and they ask me, well, what do you do? And I tell them that I work with families or people that are struggling with sexual issues. Well, why are you doing that? They say, and
Yeah,
then
nobody needs that. So
just stuff. And so I think to myself, that's what happened to him. And if you look he gets right down into helping the people to help him do the walls. But this passage is just so powerful. I found it really very powerful with this. And I'm going to read it right now. I've got it right here because he's already fighting these men who are making fun of him. And this is what he says to the people who are left there who need to build the wall. Don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome and fights for your brothers. Fight for your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes. And I thought, wow, what a great thing for parents to see
yeah,
that God wants us to fight because he wants that child more than we do.
true.
He wants to, I look at my husband and think, oh God, if he had only stayed faithful to you, he could have. I used to think that I was going to be, he was going to be the great person because he was so intelligent and so gifted. And I was just going to go along and kind of help him be the man of the world kind of thing that was going to change the world. And
Yeah,
then I saw what Satan did in his life, and it made me think there's so many wonderful people out there that Satan has just got a hold of their lives. And it
yeah,
just, I don't know if anybody's saying this, but I say now to them, fight for your kids, fight for them before God. And find out what you can do, how much better you can do to love him, and just act as someone who's going to help that child, not
yeah.
make
But
fun.
then you've got parents who say, "I am fighting for my kid, and my kid wants to change gender, so I am fighting on behalf of my child." It's like
Mm,
the wrong battle there. You're
that's right. I think we mistake that because that's not of God. God doesn't want their child to change. God
right.
had made them specifically like they are
Yes,
right now.
exactly.
And then, and so I think that I can't agree with that. I had,
No,
I had a mother say to me, "Well, I'm just proud of my daughter that she was uh, told me the truth, and that she was, she was going to be a female and just act her way out, And I just thought, and that was something positive to her, and I thought God would not have wanted that.
mm,
God had a pattern for your daughter, a very definite pattern for your daughter. And just because she thinks it's okay to be that way, that's not God's plan for her.
right, right.
So it's,
When there's experimentation, I mean, they say that kids, as they're maturing, as they're going through puberty, that there's a little bit of getting used to this new thing, and they're questioning,
yeah,
um, I'm a boy, but what would it be like to be a girl? I mean, that goes through their minds too, and it probably goes through a girl too. So there's an uncertainty about puberty.
yeah,
It seems to me that if parents would just let them struggle with it a little longer rather than let them change their gender, they
yeah,
might come out of that.
yeah,
This is really how I was made, and maybe this is the way it's meant to be.
yeah.
I also think that God wants opposite gender relationships. I mean, man and a woman married, and the man has something to learn from the woman
Absolutely.
without becoming one.
Yeah.
The boy needs to be a man without becoming a woman, but he has things to learn from the woman, and the woman has things to learn from the man, but he still wants them in their original gender. He doesn't
Yes.
want to change because of that. I mean, these are just things that that seem obvious, don't they? But
I think I've even wondered if it isn't helpful. We leave the scriptures so far behind sometimes. And it's very clear in Genesis what God wants for the man and the woman to be together. And I'm
yeah,
thinking we're losing people to marriage. We have these same gender marriages, or we don't, someone becomes another gender and they don't have the ability. And I especially cry about that because the number of people that are lost in that and has been 50% of them commit suicide. That's been the most recent one I've had. And I
no
don't know how
kidding.
much those kids, well, you know what, bottom line, there's something where the kids are missing being loved. And I'm not saying that to the parents, but there's so much in the culture now that kids really feel awful if they're not accepted a certain way or whatever. And really teaching our kids scripture and holding scripture to me is part of that. We've lost part of that with our
Yeah.
children, I think. And I'm not in this generation, so I know it's much more difficult than I'm saying. But what you said, David, I think is very important. I think sometimes when we're parents, we can be very hard with our kids. You're not going to do that. I'm not going to let you do that, blah, blah, blah. If we can start reasoning with our children and asking them questions, not yes or no questions, but asking them questions to make them think about what they're doing. And I remember a friend of mine, I just was on with the phone with her. We grew up together in high school. And
Okay.
her dad was a very, very sharp guy. And he would say to her, how do you think you want to be when you grow up? And he would tell her, they'd talk about some people that they knew. And one was a lady that was just had not done right by her life, and her life was a mess. And so he'd say, would you like to be like her? Or would you like to be like somebody else? And that's a yes and no. So I'm saying that that's not the best way to do it, but to look for ways to get our kids to think. I had a couple, a mom and a girl that wanted to become a boy, and I sent her to a counselor. And she did what I thought was really good, and that was to keep holding on. Don't let her take the whatever it is, the medicine that they take to become a boy. And so like that, hold off. Because they're so young, they don't know. And if you
Right.
can keep them, slow them down and stop them, but don't be too hard on them because they'll be deliberately away from the kid from the kid.
Rebellious,
So
because
yeah,
there is that rebellious spirit in young kids too.
yes, absolutely.
Boy,
So,
it's a tough one.
yeah,
I don't envy parents these days, especially the ones that live in the cities. Like you said, this is less prominent in where you've got to go out and do hard work. You
that's
don't have
right.
much time to think, am I a boy or a girl? You say to yourself, I better act like a boy here and be strong and just
Yeah,
throw these bales of hay up on the wagon, or I'm going to be in trouble.
yeah.
But
Well,
in the
it's
city, you don't have that kind of labor, and it's easy to shift. Between a boy can do this now, and a girl can be a programmer or an engineer, and a boy can be a nurse. There's no distinction between male and female. In these places where
you
hard
know
work.
what? There's so much demand on the parents, I think, too. And
Mhm.
it's cultural. It's all around us. It's made to seem normal. So there's just a lot, and then parents have such a heavy load, financial or whatever it is that they're trying to deal
For,
with, and
for sure.
and
Yeah.
so there's so much on the laps of our families. But when I think about now, I just got some statistics the other day about how many young people, are really getting involved in the culture in getting into homosexuality or LGBT, and then the actual transgender is just they're in the 30% of millennials and 39% of Gen Z. So we've got our young people that are getting
Wow.
caught up in this. And this is frightening to me. I think we've already got such a problem with our culture, so to speak, with
Yeah.
what's going on there. And then we have these kids that are lost in this world of sexuality that just breaks my heart. I really,
Yeah,
ah,
there was there was a court case in Texas called Lawrence against Texas. That was
Huh.
the first case where the Supreme Court, Anthony Kennedy, thank you, Mr. Kennedy,
Mhm.
ruled for the majority that homosexuality must not be illegal, must not no longer be illegal.
Mhm.
Of the choice. So there was a time in our country when we were growing up
Mhm.
when it was illegal to have that kind of relationship.
That's right.
So I'm wondering, is it wrong to put moral laws on the books like that? And
Mm.
England took their laws off the books before we did. They did it back in the early '60s. I think we did it in the '70s.
Wow.
But to me, it seems proper to have that kind of law on the books where it's actually illegal behavior.
I think it's very biblical, that's for sure.
It's certainly biblical.
It's certainly
for
biblical.
sure.
And the thing that I think that really is an argument for it is that we are losing our families, which is really the basis of our culture.
Of
And
course.
when we're having people living together, not getting married, that's one aspect of it. Then you have all these sexual issues.
Yeah.
The kids are so confused by it. I had one gal, and she was already out of school, and she said to me, "Carol, is it really wrong to be homosexual?" And I thought, "Wow, you mean you never heard anybody talk about it, or never saw it in the Bible?" She came from a Christian home, but nobody ever told her about it. So I'm thinking there's truth out there, but everybody's a little afraid to touch it because it's not good. And I see, even as I took up this sword, so to speak, that I knew that I could get some feedback from it that is not good. But
Yeah.
I just I feel like I have to do something. I know too much,
Yeah.
People ask me about it, and I say I know too much. I can't just sit by and just leave it and let people be hurt by it. So
Yeah.
we talked about the title of the book, and I thought it's kind of interesting because I think you have to go back to God to reclaim the truth of what He wants for us. So we have to turn around and take a look at what is it that we are giving in to. Do you follow what I'm saying? We're giving up our rights. We're giving up what's truth. So we have to begin by starting to say, God, what is truth? What I need to hang on to. And then as we begin to restore ourselves, not the other person, but ourselves, then we can begin to build that relationship, build that family, build love in the family. There's so much there that can be done that has to be part of the process, as we go this route. So I'm one of those. I'm one of those that doesn't want to lose our families any more than we have. So
Well, yeah. Unfortunately, we're those who feel like you, and I put myself in that group. We're swimming upstream because the government is just causing an avalanche of morality that's backwards.
that's right.
It
Absolutely.
seems like there's no turning back. I mean, Satan is at work not just here in America, but all through the West.
That's really true.
Arabic countries, Muslim countries. There's a high percentage of homosexuality going on there too among young boys because there is so much pressure to not touch a girl under Quranic law that
Wow.
they turn to each other instead for sexual release.
Oh,
Because
my
touch a
goodness.
girl.
Oh, man.
So there's a lot of pressure that's not even here in the West. It's all over the world, it seems.
Yes, it's true.
Although I don't know it's true, but I've heard it from Indian folks that I've worked with.
Mm-hmm.
Sexuality is fairly common in India as well,
Wow.
but for different reasons because they're not Muslim; they're Hindu.
Yeah.
So this is a worldwide problem, and it just seems like as we let go of our Christian values, here in the West,
Mm-hmm.
what's taken its place is I just don't know if we're going to ever come back from it.
Yeah.
There are Christian leaders, beginning with Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, and go down the list. Trying to rebuild some of the laws, put them back in place so that we have some semblance of Christian law again.
Yeah.
It seems that's just a losing, but we've got an entire political party that fights against that.
I know it. It's just very painful. And I think for me, I'm thinking you're too old. Just leave it alone, And yet I
No, you're
haven't
not.
felt like God has given me that direction.
No.
I look
As
in
long
the
as you have breath, you need to keep spreading this message because you're so clear.
yeah,
Your experience just has clarified thinking on this. And it's
yeah.
so amazing to hear you speaking in such clear terms. We need
Thank
that voice of clarity. This is like a bell in the night to listen to you talk.
It is. It is.
So,
It's wonderful.
yeah, don't give it up. Just
Okay.
continue to be the leader that you are.
Oh, thank you. Well, I don't, when the Lord gives you a direction, it's not good not to do it. I figured that out.
That's
So
for sure.
it's
That's how I felt about my book too. I mean, I felt like, and I said, Lord, I'm done writing the book, and He would come back and get dreams. I would get dreams about how I'm delaying. Like,
wow.
I won't even go into the dreams, but they were all different. All the dreams were different, but the same subject. I was.
Yeah. Yes.
Finally, I just gave in and finished it, and I've gotten a good review. I just found today a very good review from what's it called? Pacific Book Review.
Good. That's great. That's
They just gave me a great review on the book, so I'm very happy, and I was crying.
Good.
Because God has finally, given me some success through this, which was a spiritual battle in itself to get it all done, which I'm sure it was for you too.
Me too.
It's a battle. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, really true.
Yeah.
Well, are we on the end of our road here in terms of the
we
time?
got started a couple minutes late, so I think we have another minute or two.
Okay, all right.
The
Well,
stage manager is listening to us. He said he loves listening to us. So
okay.
And I've loved listening to you too. And I think the book is just fantastic. And,
Well, thank you. I really appreciate your words. That's very, very.
Well, it's not just me. Joe Dallas and the other 8 or 10 wrote words on the back of your book. So.
I worked with Joe. I've worked with Joe. When I would have conferences for my ministry, I actually developed a ministry there. I would have Joe speak almost every time. He's so
okay. Yeah.
wonderful. And just a lot of the people's names you saw in there are from that world, and they're just incredible people.
Incredible, servant-like people who just are dedicating their lives to try to help people, just like you have.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful thing. Well, I think for anybody who's out there who has needed this talk or talk with us, that I really want to encourage them, don't give up. God is there and He's with you and He'll walk with you. And just if you can't get a hold of my book, I know it's in all the
it's on Amazon and probably Barnes and Noble and Apple. I think Apple has a facility to get the book out.
Yeah.
Available for Kindle as well. Do you know?
I don't know for that for sure.
To download, I would think so. It's not a leap to go.
No, I think it is. I think it is. I didn't try it to see what it looked like because I wasn't sure how the blank pages would look in all of it.
But they take care of all that.
Yeah. So I'm thinking
and I should have paid more attention when I was looking at your book on Amazon.
I know it's on Amazon for sure.
Yeah.
And so that's some place where they could get it for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's probably a good place to end our discussion. But I just pray for you, and I just want to say thank you on behalf of many people that you've helped. I'm sure.
Oh, I pray so. I just.
Yeah, and
I can't let go. I'm still there, still a warrior.
Those seeds are having fruit. There's no question about it, and I would encourage you to keep going.
Thank you.
The book is called Reclaim, Restore, and Rebuild. Families Impacted by Sexual Brokenness.
Yes.
Carol Wagstaff is the author, and it's just been a joy to talk to you. Thank you so much for
Thank you, David.
For what you've done with the book and outside of the book. It's just been wonderful.
That's what God's about. And I think if I probably had to do it, I'd do it over again. I'm a perfectionist, but I also prayed all the way through it. God, please help someone through that. That's my prayer.
And when I think of you from now on, I'll pray for you and pray for the book as well.
Thank you.
Many hearts and will bear fruit. I'm sure the book will bear much fruit. That's all I can say.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks also to the Festival of Storytellers and the staff.
Yes.
Magnet.
Yes.
They've done a great job to bring people like Carol to the world, and it's just a great thing that they have done. Readers Magnet has done, and thank you for the technicians and the stage behind the stage manager from Sweden, operating operating the website for us from Sweden. So thank you very much, and we'll say goodbye for now, and thank you for watching Festival of Storytellers.